Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. My name is Juan and this is the place where we are all artists.
So to get started, I'm going to be using the following colors: blue, white, red, black, brown, and warm yellow. I'm going to use a little bit of white with that to make the color of the mask, and whatever brushes you might have lying around. So I'm going to mix the yellow and brown to make the color of the mask. It's more yellow than brown. And then I'm going to make the outline of the head. Once I make the outline, I'm going to paint all of the inside of the head. Now, while I do that, I want to just give a shout out to the director, Josh Rubin, of this film. It's actually one of the only times that I have made a video without actually seeing the film. I hear that it's good, and but I love the design of the mask. You know, it takes it back to the '80s slasher flick, which, as you might come to know, I really enjoy. You know, painting too, right? The classic Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and all the other slasher flicks of the 80s and 90s, even Scream. So now I'm washing my brush and drying it really, really well. Make sure it's really, really dried. Then I get some black paint, and I'm going to start on the body. And while we do that, I just want to just implore you to subscribe to our channel. We love drawing, painting, sculpting, to horror especially, but to a lot of other things as well. So the black paint I'm going to use to fill in all of this space in here. So yes, make sure that you also hit the notification bell, because you're going to want to be up to date when we have new videos released. But even though we draw superheroes, we draw fantasy, we go often to even outside of the genres that we like the most, we always actually come back to horror. We have tutorials like this on Michael Myers, Ghostface, Jason, Jigsaw, many more. So now I'm going to make a gray color, but I'm going to add a tiny hint of blue as well. And this is to make a dark bluish gray that is for his shoulders, for the rest of his frame. And aside from tutorials, we also have a lot of time lapses. We have time lapses on other horror icons like Candyman and Chatterer from Hellraiser, also Chucky. I mean, there's so many. That's just off the top of my head what I can think of. But definitely check out all of our playlists, especially tutorials. We have tutorials on Carrie, also The Grudge. Just go check it out. So I'm going to wash my brush once again. There's a lot of washing and drying, lots, over and over again. Once it's really dry, I'm going to work on those. Maybe one day will be iconic eyes of Heart Eyes. So I make a dark maroon, a dark red, I should say. And I'm going to make two heart shapes. Now, they are not entirely straight up, like they're a little bit at an angle, if I could say that. Yeah, they're at an angle. So I got to make sure that I don't make them too too upright. This brush that I'm using is slightly smaller than the previous one, so that I can get the smaller sides of the shape. In this case, the hearts. Of course, you could always stop the video to pause it so that you can you can catch up, or if I'm going too fast. And as you saw there, I dried it, washed it and dried it yet again. Now I'm going to make some shadows. All I'm doing is just adding a little bit of black to the brown and yellow mixture to make a darker shade of of that dark yellow. So I added a little bit of black to the yellow brown mixture for the mask, and I'm using that in a small quantity, not too much at all, to spread it around to add some shadows. Now you're gonna start seeing like this face, right, that starts to form. It's a mask, but it still has some defining features. It's not simply just a plain mask. It has all sorts of details, as you'll see. I wash it again and dry it yet again. And now I'm gonna use the gray that I had. I make a little bit more of it. So here I'm adding a little bit more black, a little bit more white, and a little bit, a tiny bit of blue. It was pretty quick, but I made sure I added it. To make some more of that gray, I'm gonna use that gray that I used for the shoulders to make the smile on the mask. So I'm going to continue with the same gray to make some of the lines on the mask. Try to make a very thin line, as thin as possible, with the side of the brush, kind of using it like a blade, as you can see, cutting through. And the center of the forehead over here and the top of the head, and it has some stitchings that I'm gonna make by simply adding some X's. So now I'm gonna make a lighter shade of that gray simply by adding some white. I don't even have to wash the brush this time because I didn't change colors really. Just added white to it. And I'm adding a frame around those hard eyes. A very thin frame of like silver, even though it's really just gray. But I'm gonna use that same silver that we made to make the buttons that do show. And I did not mention actually that I did go down to a smaller brush to do those frames around the eye. And now I'm moving on to a much bigger brush and mixing black and blue. And I'm gonna start making the background. That's why I need a bigger brush. It covers much more space much more quickly. So I made a dark blue by mixing black and blue. So I used that to paint the background basically. Now I am gonna get a little bit more creative. Here I'm adding some magenta. I wanna add some Valentine's colors to this painting. So I add a little bit of pink, magenta, as I'm adding the blue background. I don't even have to wash the brush or anything. I just added a hint, a glob of that. Then I add blue. I'm gonna move back and forth honestly between colors. I'm just gonna get just all sorts of loose with it. I'm gonna go between the dark blue I made, some magenta here and there, regular blue, whatever really I want to put up there, whatever you want to put. If you make this painting, just make it as creative, as colorful as you choose to. I'm just providing a sort of baseline, but the painting will be yours. You see here I'm adding some of that pink. It fades in, becomes purple. Anything really. Here I add a little bit of white or gray to change it up, make it more interesting, so it won't just be a flat one color background. Now I do want to say all of these colors would benefit from a second layer when it dries. So as you'll see, I'm gonna add a second layer to make it more solid, less see-through. For now, this is still the first layer. And I moved on to a smaller brush to outline the head. So now I'm gonna add more shades, more shadows, I should say, to the mask. So I add a little bit of black to that yellow color once again to make it darker. And I'm gonna go for more shadows. So I'm gonna go even darker. I added a little bit more black to make even darker shadows, as you'll see. Hopefully you get comfortable with this. You start practicing more the shadows, and then you get comfortable enough to add them where they need to go, just to make it much more realistic, much more interesting, I would think, in my opinion. A little bit more in the background, more pink, more, although I'm going to let it dry though before I add more to the background, really. So now I'm going to work on the eyes a little bit. So the eyes definitely need more, layers of paint. So first I just add red again. Just red without anything else in it, just red by itself. I add it again. But as you'll see, I'm gonna make a lighter shade. I'm gonna make a mixture of the red and some of that yellow, and also a hint of white to make it like a bright orange color. It's gonna be very bright, and you'll see that it's gonna make for the glow, or that's what I'm aiming for, to make it like a glow. Okay, so I know that this was instant, but I actually let this dry for hours. Yeah, I went to do something else and I let this dry. And now I'm adding another layer to the eyes. If it dries, even better. I mean, well, actually, that's how it's supposed to be. You let it dry before you add another layer. Of course, sometimes you might not have time, but it's always best practice. So as you see now, it's even brighter because it dried. I added another layer. I added a layer to it, the whole eye, like the red part, the bright orange glow part. Here I'm going in the center again to make it darker. That will pronounce the brightness around more because the center will be darker. Okay, so now one very important step. I'm going to add a very, very thin line of white paint, as much as I can, to the center of that bright orange or bright red orange outline that I had put there. So in the center of that, I'm adding white, a very thin white line, so that it's glowing even more. Okay, so now to the whole painting, in the mouth, everything around the background, everything, even the face is going to need more shadows. Everything is going to need another layer of paint, basically. The only thing I'm not adding really is just the base yellow, but I'm going to do the mouth here. I'm going to work on adding more shadows to the mask, and then the background will get another layer of the paints that I added already. That's pretty much the next step. I am going to add here another step, a very blurry, just barely any paint, reddish, darkish red, to right around the mouth. I saw in the image that I'm using as a source that there is some red around the mouth a little bit. But apart from that, like I mentioned, so here I'm making a very dark yellow once again. The previous one dried. So I'm making a new dark yellow to add shadows. And it's going to be all around this time. I really don't want that bright yellow showing like this. It's kind of a little bit too pronounced. I want it to be more muted. I want to make it darker so there's more shadows, so it's more realistic. So now I'm going to go for very, very dark shadows. And I'm basically going to use black by itself. But I'm going to make sure I wipe off most of it with a paper towel. And here I am just rubbing it on some of these areas to make a very, very dark shadow. And it will make for it to be even more realistic, because it has more apparent shadows. So I realized that I want to add a little bit of blue hue to the side of the mask, being that the background is bluish, so there should be a little bit of that reflected on the mask somewhat. So here I'm adding just a little bit. It's a tiny bit, and what I do is add a tiny bit, and I just spread that as far as it can go. I'm gonna add a little bit of the pink too, magenta, just to make it all more consistent. The background is there, and the mask should reflect a little bit of it. So here, as I mentioned before, I'm adding another layer of paint to the background. It's going to come out much better this way because it's not translucent. You won't be able to see through it. It'll be much more solid and just more colorful overall. So please do leave a comment or two in the comment section. Anything at all pertaining to the film or pertaining to art or pertaining to horror, to anything whatsoever. Please, it really helps the channel to have traction, to have motion. So please remember to leave a comment if you're able to. So I'm continuing to just add more layers of paint, more layers to the clothing here. But once I have this, we're pretty much almost done. I'm just gonna add just a tiny bit more pink to this side of the head here to reflect the background that has some pink in it. And after that, Mr. Hard Eyes will be ready for his next victims. Well, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for visiting my channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and also hit the notification bell. Also give the video a like because I'm sure you liked it, because you like horror films just like I do. Now, make sure you check out all of our playlists because there's plenty there and I'm sure you will love it all. And also visit etherealartsstudio.com.